Bach. You might recognize it from this sound. And although it wasn't written for guitar, it is one of the most popular pieces in the guitar repertoire, especially as like an early performance stage piece. It's absolutely gorgeous. It works well on our instrument, except we're playing it in D major instead of G major, which is the key it was written in. Like I said, it's the first cello suite that is coming out that this was written for. So we're playing on the guitar, which does a quite good job of imitating the cello. And we're going to be talking about those types of things throughout this, and just some of the fingerings, the way to work through this, and the ways to make it easy. So there's some notes that the cellos play that we're going to change a little bit. Some of the chords we might change a little bit just to better fit our instrument. So I hope you'll join me on this. It's quite a beautiful piece. It's a lot of fun to play. Thanks for tuning into this live stream. And like always, if you have questions, please leave them in the comments. I will get to them at the end of this in a question and answer session. So anything you might have questions about the guitar or Bach or the cello suites or fingerings, anything about the nylon string guitar in general, I would be happy to answer. So let's go ahead and get started. So one thing about Bach, he died in the year 1750. Which kind of marks the end of the Baroque era of music, which kind of transitions into the classical music, the classical period. And this piece is so iconic. It starts out this entire suite that he wrote for solo cello, and a prelude is very improvisational, and the ideas kind of go here, there, back, turning around. It's a very improvisational type piece for Bach to write, and it's typical form of a prelude. And we're going to be talking about a lot of those little elements throughout here, but also I'll just be guiding you through this piece. So let's go ahead and start at the beginning. We're starting out with this open D, A, F sharp, okay? And then we're going to use that first string to go between the F, E, F, this iconic line. Now you notice here I'm playing P-I-A-M-A with my right hand, which, by the way, P, for those of you that might not already know this, we refer to the thumb as the finger P, our index finger as I, M as middle. Those are easy, right? Because they're the same as the English words. And then A for a ring finger. So P-I-M-A. So I was saying I do P-I-A-M-A there. But there's another way to play this, and I'll let you decide which way is better. And that is to do a pull-off from this F sharp to the E. So, which I quite like. Now to give you my 2 cents on that, I really like it this way because it more imitates the cello's really lyrical nature, right? And with a cello, you have a bow, and you could continue one bow motion when you change fingers. On the guitar, we're plucking with individual fingers, so we can end up getting accused of sounding really plucky, meaning just very articulate, da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da, instead of da-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da, like a cellist might sound. So we try to imitate that in some ways by adding slurs or legatos to make it a little bit more connected. So experiment with that. On that third note, that F sharp on the 2nd fret, doing a pull off to the E, so like this. So that compared to all plucked. Right? There's quite a difference. That's all legato. So there's an important distinction to make, and that is, if whichever one you choose, it's important to keep that format as we continue it throughout the piece. It may not be possible absolutely everywhere, for instance here, because we're doing something that makes it work well on the guitar for us. That being said, if you do the next measure all plucked when you're trying to imitate the cello, then it's a little weird and confusing for the listener to hear it once, the second time But, you know, to each their own. I would just recommend choosing one or the other and sticking to that. So, for the sake of this, let's do the pull-off. Next measure, we play open D, open B. And we're doing a pull-off from that G to the F sharp. And then the next measure, very similar, except we're playing a C sharp instead of that open B. So it's, we're gonna do, so open 1, 3, and doing a pull off to our second finger, right? And then we're resolving back down to that D in the middle voice. So it went, we're back up to the voice, so. Okay, so let's review that again. We have A, okay, A on the third string here. Then we have B, so it goes A, B in that middle voice. C sharp in that middle voice. And then D in the middle voice. And you'll find this is something all over Bach's music. You'll have 3 separate voices, even when the line seems like it's just one line. It's really an amazing thing. It's part of what makes Bach's music so special. He somehow makes simple things sound really incredible, and a lot of it's through the voices that he keeps going. So that one of those voices is the D. That one is just lamenting. It's just D every time in the bass. See again. Still D. Still D. And then you can separate the top voice, which is. So you put it all together, well, once again that A, and we never went over that one alone, but it's A, then B, C sharp, D. So that's the first 4 measures. If you put it all together, it's. Okay, so we've got the first 4 measures already. People are in love. This is a beautiful piece. Everyone recognizes it. But how can we make it special? How can we follow the harmonic motion to make it a piece of music that isn't just arpeggios and these sort of boring little lines? We have to have the melodic and harmonic gestures going somewhere. So what I like to do is imagine that these lines are by themselves, like we just demonstrated. Like we have this line with the most clear motion, right? What does that do? That creates these spots where we have the most tension. And I would argue the most tension is right there on the 3rd measure, where we have the C sharp, and then it resolves to the D, right? So it's wherever you can create that big pull and then the release from it. So that's going to guide our musical decision here, which is going to be, let's make that tension really obvious and then pull away for the resolution, right? That's how the story goes, right? All stories, a lot of stories at least, most good ones, they have a climax to the story and then a resolution, right? The happy ending isn't the most exciting part of the story, it's just the most relieving part. So let's hear that again, and this time we're going to build to that 3rd measure where we have that C sharp and the middle voice, and then we're going to fall back down to that resolution with that D in the middle voice. Let's try it. Right? So now it's going somewhere. Unfortunately, we've got 2.5 more pages to go to do this type of thing and create ideas like this, and they can't all be the same. So it's kind of what makes music interesting, and this particular type of music, which has so much data and content in it, so exciting to play. So we're likely not going to get through the entire piece today, but we're going to hit some of these key moments and do things like that. You know, analyze it, figure out what's going on, what it's trying to point to, and try to make it as easy to play as possible. So hopefully that all answers your questions for the first 4 measures. Like I said, I will be doing a question and answer at the end of this stream, so be sure to stay tuned for that and leave a comment if you'd like me to answer something. And don't wait till the end, because it's really hard to get to it then. Okay, so now we're going to move on to measure 5 here. Well, I'll start at measure 4 so you can hear how it kind of moves into it. Okay, so it takes us somewhere else, and that's just the form of the prelude. It's improvisational. Nothing is really a clear direction. It's improvisational. So we're playing measure 5. Once again, you can keep that same pull off there. Now, I choose to play this on the 4th string because it sounds more like a cello. You could do it like that. Of course, you could play it, but it just sounds really bright. You don't really hear cellists making sounds like this. They're very expressive with this piece. It's beautiful. And by the way, I'm sorry to be a little scatterbrained here with you, but if you're working on this piece and it's something that you decide to take up and spend some time with, even if not, really go listen to a cellist play it. That is going to be the most raw and informed version of this. And then we take some of that joy and we try to apply it to the guitar. That's kind of how it works with pieces that we try to take to our instrument. We try to take some of that and then try to make it better in some way for our instrument. Not a better piece of music, but a better piece of music for our instrument. So definitely listen to some cellists play it. Yo-Yo Ma is a favorite. It's going to be amazing. So let's hear this part again at measure 5. Okay, so that's kind of what it does. He uses this melody to lead us into this beautiful spot. Now, something you'll hear people do here is hit an octave, and since we're in drop D, forgot to mention that, but you'll see at the top left of the music there that it says we're in drop D. Since we're in drop D, all of those octaves from those bass lines are going to be on the same fret, just 2 strings down. So there at measure 6, you can use that. You can, on the second time, you have that G sharp, which is peculiar, right? We don't have G sharp in the key of D major. So we have that G sharp, it's really cool, and we bring it out by doing things like this. And then it resolves. So on that note, there's a way to complicate the beginning a little bit and add a little bit more color and depth to it. And that is by playing every other of these Ds on that 6th string. So like this. But not to overcomplicate things. That's just something you can decide to add in. You can take your pen or edit your PDF or make a note there in your music that's a possibility. You can just draw a circle on the 6th string or draw in a little D, which is, 3 ledger lines away. But let's go ahead and move on to that spot at measure 6 where I mentioned at first that you could do this. That's not too hard to add in there. And then we're just going to slide down 1 fret, C sharp, and then move to the open E. And we're using that to let our hand shift. Okay? We're going to always try to use, with classical guitar and any style of guitar playing, this really helps. Think of open strings as the method of transition between one spot and another on the fingerboard. Because if you don't think of those open strings as opportunities to shift, what ends up happening is you do this. And you have really huge, quick movements like that, which result usually in this sound. Like a big accent that is really unneeded in the music. So use this open E that's written in there at measure 7 to shift your hand here to second position and play. It's just 4, 3, 4, and then open E again. So let's try that for measure 6. I'm going to do that slowly. You see how there's no big shift here. I just use that open string as time to move my 4th finger here to that 5th fret. So, not like that. So, I'm very particular about my fingering here when we're getting to the end of measure 7. This is at the beginning. I'm going to use my 2nd finger here on this A. That is the last beat of measure 7. And I play 2, 3, open, 2. And that is so that I can have my first finger, my 1th finger, my 1st finger free to come down to this bar at measure 8, okay? So measure 8, where we have that B in the bass, or that 2nd fret of the 5th string, we're gonna bar on that 2nd fret so that we can catch all of these notes really easy and we don't have to do something funky like this. Of course, there's a lot of different ways to finger this piece. This is just the way I'm recommending for you today. So, we're going to play 3, 2, 3 there, or D, C sharp, D, and we're just going to use that bar there to get that C sharp. And then playing P, I, A. Oh, and this is where you can do a slur. I almost forgot we were doing the slurs. Which meaning we're going to pull from our 2nd finger to the 1st finger here. And then now we're going to play this E on the 4th string. G sharp, A, B, A, G sharp, F, E. Okay, so that's simple enough. Again, a very cello-like moment, so I try to really play that nice and warm instead of bright and flamenco guitar-y, right? We're trying to imitate a cello to some degree, or at least pull some of the nice elements from the cello, right? So, and 3, 2, 0, 5, 4, 3 in the tabs. But E, G sharp, A, B, A, G sharp, F, E. And then we're doing this thing where we're kind of climbing the ladder but facing downwards, right? It's da da da, dee da da, dee da da, going up a step and coming back down. So it's D, C sharp, B, A, G sharp, F. Okay? And here we're going to finally release this here with this open A and the C sharp. So it's effectively making the A major chord. So, like we did at the beginning, measure 3 was the climax and we resolved at measure 4. Again, that sounds like this. How are we going to apply that to where we're at now? I just mentioned this A major that we're resolving to. And what we're going to do is we're going to hear this again coming from maybe here, which is measure 7, and then measure 8. And build. So we're going to build at this moment at measure 9. That's a really big climax. We're getting to that A. So we're going to make sure we have some sort of motion there. And sometimes it's a little bit of an eggshell rondo. Right? It's a really big moment. So it's really nice. Then we really go to a different place here when we have this next D sharp, and also an F sharp in the bass. So Notably, this F sharp in the bass, looks like G sharp, but we're tuned in drop D, remember? It makes a difficult stretch. So I want to give you the option of not playing that F sharp in the bass. You could just play that D sharp. I'll show you, it's got a similar effect. And the way to really bring it out is if you stay on that D sharp a second. So there's lots of ways to emphasize notes, right? We've got volume, we've got time, and we've got color. Okay, so if we take away, and we've got octave, right? So what range we're in. And that's the one that's emphasizing it here and with volume because it's 2 notes coming in. I'll welcome you to just try other ways to emphasize that D sharp. In some ways, when you take away that F sharp in the bass, it even more accentuates that D sharp. Let's listen to that. Right? So you can totally do that and not deal with this stretch. But if you do this stretch, I'm using my 3rd finger, my 4th finger here, and then stretching to that A, that 2nd fret of the G string. Catching that D sharp again with my 4th finger. And then I'm jumping into a bar, which actually makes it quite easier. We're playing B and F sharp. So that could resolve a lot of different ways, but it's resolving to this E minor. Okay, so let's do that again. I'm going to play it without that octave. That's pretty self-explanatory. Again, you can do the slurs. Even though it's not the same as the beginning anymore, we can still to mimic the beginning, right? Okay, we're on to the next page here, and measure 13. Again, it's a little bit of a difficult stretch here. I'm using my 3rd finger on that F sharp, and then my 2nd finger on that A sharp. I wouldn't remove it here just because it's not so hard of a stretch. This is kind of like the C major shape, but just up a fret and a few different strings involved, but you get the idea. So what we're going to do is play those 2 notes together. You know what, there's a point of contention here to mention, because now we have this chord, we've got a 4-note chord. On the cello, they're not holding out 4-note chords while they're playing the rest of this melodic line, for instance. It sounds sort of more like that. Some people will tell you that you should never let these notes ring out because it's not very cello-like, and like I told you, we are imitating the cello. But my opinion, and I think the opinion of many others, is that when it benefits our instrument, we've got to use that to make it filled out and beautiful, because there's a lot of things the cello does that we cannot do in terms of beauty and volume and chunkiness of those bass notes. They can really make it loud where it almost hurts your ears. So we've got to do something sometimes and just to make it sound a little bit more fitting on our instrument. And I think that's a good excuse here to allow these notes to ring. If anything, it helps emphasize that harmony, right? So then we're going to move on to the 2nd position bar. Another thing you can do is catch that bar here, a note before. So you have an open string, C sharp, and a bar, and then you catch very easy transition there. So hopefully that works for you as well. Let's do that again. I didn't do that transitional bar. And the reason why we do that is so it doesn't sound like this. What ends up happening is that last C sharp gets cut. So listen carefully if I play it slower. Did not execute the mistake, right? neither that time, but you get the idea. It's really weird to jump your hand there because it cuts off that last C sharp of measure 13. So what we're going to do, like I said, is bar one little 16th note early, so we don't cut that last 16th note. Open D, then we use that open D to shift up here to the C sharp. And since this is a nice little passage, and it's very easy to do this one, we got the fourth string here on the, the fifth string here on the fourth fret, and the seventh fret here on the fourth string. What we're going to talk about here is just some of these repeated lines where you've got an entire measure that's all the same notes, and it's exactly a copy and paste, right? Not really a copy and paste, but you know what I mean. So you have this. Now, what do you think is more interesting to do? And play it exactly the same, or to have something like an echo, for instance. And then the same thing here. It really creates an element, right? When a nice phrase that one of my former professors used to always say is that when you repeat something, when you're speaking in any language and you repeat something, there's a meaning why, there's a reason why you're repeating it, right? If you're giving someone orders, or or maybe someone didn't hear you and you're repeating what you said, what do? You say it louder. Or maybe if you're nervous about what you said, you say it quieter the second time. If someone said, "What did you just say to me?" or something like that, right? So there's always a meaning when we repeat something, and in music, it's the same sort of way. There's sometimes that repeating something the same exact way has a purpose too, and that's a statement of its own. But the majority of the time when you repeat something, it's for a meaning, and especially in Baroque music, we use this a lot. So one of the things you can do, like I said, is create an echo effect here. So which you just do by getting quieter and moving to a different part of the guitar, right? So here I was playing it first, and I move more ponticello, or closer to the bridge, right? Which makes it brighter because the strings are tighter there. So you can do that, or you can do it purely with volume without moving your hand. So it could be, which is also a neat effect. So you can play around with different things and see what really works well for you and what's fun and interesting. So we have that again, like I said. Then we have a bar here, 4th fret bar. Okay, so we're going to play our second finger here on the D, that 5th fret of the 5th string, yet we're going to be barring with our first finger, the 4th fret. So hopefully that makes sense there. And we're just going to be doing 3, 1, 3. Also, you can notice something about this barred finger. I am not barring it like this. My finger is not all the way down across the fingerboard because I simply don't need to use my entire finger to bar that entire fretboard, because that's going to use a lot of energy to do this. And it's unnecessary when only 3 of the strings are being played, right? The 5th, 4th, and the 3rd. So I'm using this joint in my finger right here, bending, to press down. See, everyone can move this joint at least a little bit. And I'm using it to press down only 3 of the strings. And if this is your first time trying that, it might feel a little weird, but it's definitely worth it in the end to save your finger from squeezing all of the strings all the time when you do bars. So I'm doing 3, 1, 3 to catch that 3rd string. And then now we've got all open strings and just that second finger on the A. Simple enough for measure 17 there, right? Okay, we're on to measure 18. And by the way, I know we're kind of speeding through this. I'm trying to get through as much of the piece as possible. That being said, if you have questions about a particular moment, maybe I didn't cover it, maybe I didn't get to it today, or maybe I did. Whatever it is, go ahead and leave it in the comments wherever you're at. That way I have a chance to get to it and I can see it afterwards. It doesn't even necessarily have to be about this piece. It could be about anything guitar related, and we'll talk about it. Okay, so we are at measure 18, right after all these open notes on the measure 17. Now measure 18. A lot of tension there because you have this suspension going to this resolution at measure 19. Worth circling. You know, by the way, if you have something like an iPad, or you obviously have a mobile device or a computer if you're watching this, when you get the music, it's nice to mark it up and add write in where you see this tension. If I'm looking at my music here and I just look at this white piece of paper, I don't see the areas until I'm really looking at the chords and listening to it as I'm playing it, where those tensions are. However, if I mark in there, maybe with a highlighter, I can see, okay, everywhere I highlighted, it's dissonance, meaning it's like a crunchy sounding chord, like a suspension that leads somewhere. So a lot of times I'll make marks on my music where those spots are so I know it's coming, where it's at, and then what to do after it. So that's one of those spots, and then measure 19. That's a little quote of the beginning, right? We're back at the beginning, basically, at measure 19, except it's going to lead us somewhere else. Okay, so. And it's almost nice to hold on to that last F sharp because to a listener that may not know this piece, you may feel like, oh, we're going back to the beginning. But we're not. We take this measure 18. It's such a different place it takes you. You feel like it's just going to be back in the beginning. So. Now there are some easier places to play this chord. I really like it here. So what I'm doing is G sharp, E, and then open B. This is kind of a weird thing. Because after that, instead of the typical moving up a string to continue the melody, we're going down a string to the third string, right? So we're playing 6th string, 5th string, 2nd string for that B, then the 3rd string for that C sharp and D. So, and you have to come back to that B. I measure 20 here. But at least it's an exact repeat. And then measure 21. Now down to G natural. That's interesting, right? We're going. Then we'll see where it goes next. But same idea. This time we're going up to that B again. And then down to the A. Not just back up to the B, but down to an A on the 4th string. So we're going 2nd string, 3rd string, 4th string. As you can see in the tab, that illustrates it really well, actually. Another exact repeat, and then the same thing apparently, but then, and we have a rhythmic moment here. Something really important is happening. Before, it's been straight 16th notes, no break in that. It's all 16th notes. Then we end up doing this, where we have an 8th note followed by 16th note rest. This is a spot that a lot of guitarists get wrong, and cellists too, I'm sure, that are new to the piece. What'll happen is when you come back in with that E, that 2nd fret of the 4th string in measure 22, you make it sound like beat 1, so it'll sound like this, which is so confusing. That is coming in on the E, there's a 1 E and a, it's coming on that 2nd 16th note of the beat. So you have to feel, you can even tap your foot for that 1 and then play 1 E and 1 or so. E and 4 E and 1 like this. So it's really the important thing is that the accent comes in on that A, that 2nd fret of the 3rd string. So it's rhythmically that makes sense. Right? It makes way more sense than this. It didn't really lead there, right? It sounded like it was in the middle of a beat. So you have to feel 1 E and 1 E and 1. So E and 1 E and 1. Really important to feel that. If it's a little confusing right now, do it with a metronome, break it down. That is one of the most missed parts of this piece. So. There's a lot of ways to finger this. I'll show you why I do it this way at measure 23. I really like how staying on the second string keeps the tone even, okay? And it really leads somewhere. Now, every time you don't want to shift up and back down, as you'll see how this line goes, because it just gets a little bit too shifty, and I think it'll take away from the music and get too technical. But here, it's very possible to keep it all on the same string. Then we're going to use the third string. Okay, now we're at the point where we're going to start descending back down. So, we have... Okay, now we have that A major chord again at measure 25. Okay, so this is an interesting moment because if you notice, something particular is happening in the bass line, right? Before we had all these weird notes. We had G sharp, we had G natural, we had D's ringing out. We had all sorts of different notes, but now you're stuck on this A, right? Well, what we call this is a pedal A. He's really emphasizing that 5, right? D, E, F, G, A. We're in D major. We're moving up to the 5th. So he's really emphasizing that 5. So that begins right at measure 23, right at that interesting moment where we have that 16th note rest. Sorry, it's... See that A in the bass? Another A, another A, and I'll stop saying it because it just keeps on going. And now on to measure 27. Okay, we're back to A, 2 A's on the bass and in the soprano line here, right? The 5th fret of the 1st string. So, okay, back at another A, big shock right now. But this is another spot that gets wrong, very easy to get the rhythm wrong, right? So we've got a 16th note starting out measure 29, and then we've got a 16th note rest. That is a total of 1/8 note. So it's 1 and 2. We got to think 1 and 2 and, so this is 1, oops. So we're feeling A, G, F, E, so A, G, F, E. Okay, so it's falling on 8th notes. A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, right? So, no tricks in here. You really have to just find the beats. So A, G, F, E is most accented. A is most accented. D, G. Okay. All the time you hear this go wrong, you'll hear things like this. You'll just hear all sorts of weird rhythmic patterns. So with the metronome, it's nice and slow. And it's a subtle difference. You might think it doesn't make a big difference, but it really does. It makes the music have a total different direction. But since we only have a few minutes left here, I'm going to try to finish up and get through the rest of this piece. But as a quick reminder, go ahead and leave questions in the comments. I will get to it right after this, and I'll be more than happy to answer all the questions that you have. So, we're at measure 31. Okay, there's a lot of things to talk about here, but notice now we still have this pedal A, right? But we also have this E being repeated in that 16th note line. But notice the moving line is on the second string, right? So another mistake that often happens is that we bring out this high E too much, like this. But that's really uninteresting. We don't want to hear that E so loud. So something you can work on is doing this nice and slow, and making sure that E is nice and quiet, because it's not important at all. Okay, we're moving up the second string. Really nothing complicated about this part except, so we get to here, measure 37. Okay, so now we are at this A and C together, still A in the bass, nothing to overcomplicate about this part. So we're going to move up to here after we move up to the fifth. We're going to move up to the fifth position right here to the E and the C sharp, and then we're going to move to F and D. And just keep on sliding up. There's nothing special about. Okay, we're going to move up to the seventh position, and we're going to play C sharp and G, the biggest climax of the piece that we're going to be crescendoing up to. So if we start at measure 38, it's going to be. Right? That is the biggest moment of the piece, and we really have to build to that. Once again, just from measure 38, but that crescendo is going to start much earlier when we start. I'll just start from here. And this is a bar chord on the seventh position. Notice I'm not barring the whole thing because we still got to have that pedal A. Sliding our pinky down to that C sharp, and then second finger on the G. And then a big D major chord. Right? Same on cello, they have to roll the chord. It's really beautiful. We can make this huge and drawn out if we would like to. Okay? So I hoped I introduced you well to this piece and cleared up some problems that maybe you might run into as you work on this. It's really quite beautiful. This whole cello suite is just gorgeous. I highly recommend you check it out. Like I said, listen to cellists play it. I'm really excited to get to your questions here. If you have any others, please go ahead and comment them. Let's go ahead and get to some questions. All right. Oh, okay. And great. Awesome. Well, we're just going to answer up a few questions here about Bach and its application depending on what instrument it was written for. So, you know, this is one of the only pieces in this course that is pulled from another instrument's repertoire. You know, we call that a transcription or an arrangement. And this particular one is from a cello suite. Now, guitarists have played a lot of music from the cello suites. That being said, we also play a lot of music that Bach wrote for harpsichord, keyboard instruments. He has solo flute partitas and solo violin partitas. And each one of those we treat a little differently. So the questions that have been asked are about the cello and imitating the cello versus other instruments. Okay, so when we imitate the cello, we're trying to imitate, like I mentioned here in this course, that we're trying to imitate some of the legato elements of the cello and also the timbre of the cello as it ascends up the neck, right? So when we're imitating the timbre of the cello, we're trying to get a very legato sound. They kind of go hand in hand. We're trying to go warm. We're trying to, we always imitate this type of thing, like glissandos. However, in this Bach, we're not really doing any glissandos, but at moments like this, like if you look at measure 6, we have a moment like this. We really want this to sustain. We want that sustain, like imagining a cello and how that sustains those lower notes. That's one of the ways that we're imitating the cello here. And also we're doing our best to just give it its qualities, those beautiful qualities that the cello has in those lower registers by doing that. So now on other instruments, which we're not covering in this piece, but if you take, for instance, a piece written on the harpsichord by Bach, you know, and a number of his harpsichord pieces, what we're trying to get there is a really even sound, because the harpsichord was basically the predecessor to the piano, or a few generations back. But what the harpsichord did differently than the piano now is that the harpsichord played every single note the same volume. Okay, so you cannot have a really quiet bass line and then a really loud melody. It was all happening at once. And when we play that type of music, although we may not play every single note the same volume, we're going to borrow from that and try to make it sound a little bit like the harpsichord might play it, and maybe be a little bit more percussive. That's another thing, totally different than the cello. Like in a cello suite, you're going to really aim to be very legato. Whereas in a harpsichord piece, a little bit more of the choppy, articulated nature might be found. Right? So if you're playing a piece that's originally for harpsichord, it's okay not to connect as much as you would the notes. Maybe there would be less things like these long slurred areas, and there'd be more articulations as you did that, because this would just not be a sound that's heard on the harpsichord. So hopefully that clears up some things about that, and I'll try to hit on some other instruments to clear up the differences in the way we interpret Bach on the guitar. Okay, someone asked, please repeat the dropped D information. 6th string is dropped to D, yes? Yes. Okay, so when we say drop D, it just means turning this low 6th string, right? The strings go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The thickest string being the 6th. And we just go from standard E tuning down to drop D. So what you can do to test to see if you're in the right place is by playing this D on the 4th string and tuning your 6th string to match that, right? And also, if you have one of these clip-on tuners, there's a million different brands of these. This one is a D'Addario Planet Waves one. You can put those on your headstock, and then it'll let you know when you're close, whether you should go lower or higher. So, yeah, in this piece, we're dropped down to D, and this is in this particular transcription that I did here. This piece works really well in D because you get those doubles of notes, like I mentioned. If you have the beginning of the piece, notice I'm playing on that 4th string, this higher D, you can do this and have that low D there with no effort, just reaching your thumb a little bit lower, and do that in all the different areas of the piece. So if I was in standard tuning and I wanted to do that, E is the lowest I could go there. And also in other spots, because you might ask, well, that's just for the D, it's in D major, right? But in other spots you have this at measure 6, where you have a G sharp. Okay, you have G sharp here, and then also just 2 strings below it on the same fret. So that's the advantage you get when these 2 strings are the same pitch. Now I can do this if I'd like. So drop D is essentially useful in any piece or tune or song where you need a lot of octaves going on and you don't want to do big stretches. For in that example, in order to play the G sharp in open tuning, instead of doing this and playing here, I would have to stretch to here. So I'd have to play. And now we're doing a lot of unnecessary stretching. That would be a lot easier if it was just right there on the same fret. Okay? So unless you have any other questions about Bach and the tuning here, I believe we'll close this. I'll wait just for a second to see if any more pop up. But I hope you enjoyed learning this. It's not going to be a piece that takes you, oh great, tomorrow rolls by and you're playing it perfectly. It takes some time. And what I'd encourage you to do as you work on this piece is to just take it chunk by chunk. Find an area, maybe measures 1 through 5, and try to just get that performable. Get that up to a high level. Don't think of the whole piece as this thing that you cannot play it until it's all the way done. Find an area, perfect it, get that chunk really nice and smooth, and then move on to the next chunk. And you can pick little closing points for those areas for it to be really, to at least be a little bit cohesive. You don't want to end right in the middle of a measure, So I hope that clears up some of your answers, some of your concerns with this Bach. Next week, we'll be moving on to, oh wow, I'm trying to remember what it is next week. Next week is La Catedral by Agustin Barrios. So if you're into South American music, or maybe if you don't even know you're into South American music, it is what they say, the magnum opus, like maybe the most successful work of the Paraguayan composer Agustin Barrios. We're going to be going over that first movement, and boy is it gorgeous. It is such a beautiful movement. It starts out like this. And it's just beautiful. Oh, one more question popped in here. Let's see. The first measure, the pull off to the E, then back to the F sharp. Are you playing the F sharp with the same finger you played it before the pull off, or are you alternating? Great question. When you say alternating, I'm thinking you mean in the right hand. Let me check first the left. So the question here is asking about E, the pull off to E and the back to F sharp. This. Okay. You're probably asking about alternation in the right hand. In the left hand, I'm using the same finger here. So I'm using 2, pull off to 0, and then 2 again. So if you're asking about the left hand, that's what I'm doing. But in the right hand, no, you know what? I'm just repeating A. The funny thing is I'm breaking one of those cardinal rules of not repeating fingers in the right hand, but this is one of those rare situations where it's okay. And here's why. You're never going to play this prelude where it's that speed. It's unnecessary to play it that way. It's not how cellists would play it or the way we think Bach played it. So there's no need to think about what this would be at a really quick tempo. So because of that, what's more important is preserving the quality of sound each single time we play that note. The last thing we want is for the sound to be different by switching to another finger. So maybe while you're questioning, you might do P, I, A, M when you come back to that F sharp. But if you did that, it causes two problems. One is it creates an awkward stretch between that first string and the third string in your right hand. And when you have your A finger on the first string and your index on the third, it's just like home. It feels like home because it's a perfectly natural stretch. You got your index. We all practice with our index on the third, our middle on the second, and our ring on the first. So if you can keep that and you have such a perfectly spaced out little way of playing the intro to this Bach, you can just, yeah, with all of these I'm repeating fingers, and you can just create a really even sound like a cello would have. So like I said in the beginning, and might as well mention it here again, listen to some cellists play this, and it's really worth it to try imitating them. One thing that you can do, since cellists don't play this in D major, they play it in G, you can get a program that changes the pitch of recordings. So what I'll do is I'll download it or buy the piece, and then I'll put it through some program. Or you can put it through your recording program if you have like Reaper or any of the number DAWs. You can pitch shift and preserve the speed and play along with it. And that's a really, really great tool. So, as always, more tips like this. I have lots of original pieces and etudes that I wrote out to help with some of this right hand stuff that might be confusing in my full course on jam play. And I think you guys would really enjoy that. So I think that's all, unless we might have any other questions. You guys have been really great. Like I said, I look forward to next week where we're going to be tackling one of the most popular pieces written for classical guitar. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.